Thank you, Maisel. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michelle Gongora, Chief of Safety and District Services at District 11. I'm excited to welcome you to the second day of the 16th Annual Procurement and Resource Fair, brought to you virtually this year. And the event is brought to you by the Small Business Team, the District 11 Small Business Council, and the San Diego Public Agency Consortium. For those of you that joined us yesterday for the Public Agency Consortium Day, or either of the workshops provided this morning, thank you. We hope you found the information useful. I realize it was a lot of information, and we will follow up with you with the links that were talked about during those workshops. I'd like to thank you all for taking time to be part of this year's event. The Procurement and Resource Fair is one of the largest annual outreach events hosted by Caltrans District 11 and the San Diego Public Agency Consortium. And it was very challenging this year to come up with a way to still hold the event virtually, but we hope that you found it successful. As a reminder, for any questions, please post those in Q&A. In the chat feature, I will be posting links to some of the websites that Brett is discussing. So I'd like to share a little bit of information about the San Diego, Orange, and Imperial Procurement Technical Assistance Center. PTAC is an economic development program of Southwestern College. PTAC's mission is to assist small businesses with information, resources, and technical assistance they need to effectively compete for and perform on federal, state, and local government contracts. This assistance is provided at no cost to small business owners. Caltrans and PTAC have supported each other for many years, and PTAC has previously hosted a workshop at the Procurement Fair. We appreciate the continued support from PTAC, and at this time I would like to introduce Mr. Brett Householder, the Acting Director of PTAC. Brett, welcome and take it away.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for being here. As Michelle said, my name is Brett Householder. I'm the Acting Director for our PTAC, and she gave you a great overview of the services we provide. I'm going to give a little bit more detail on some of the things we can help out with, and then we'll jump into the presentation. But I do want to start with a poll question. So, Maria, if you're ready for the first poll question, I'd just like to know in the audience, have you ever worked with a PTAC before? And while you're answering that question, I'll tell you a little bit about what we do in more detail. So we are a free resource. If you have questions about how to sell to government agencies, we have resources available to help you through that process, whether it's an agency like Caltrans or maybe a local agency, state of California, federal government agency. We have resources in place that can help you learn how those processes work. We're going to talk specifically today about responding to proposals, but we can provide assistance basically on anything you can think of related to government contracting. And we do webinars like this all the time. At some point in the chat, I'm going to, hopefully they're going to be posting a link to our upcoming events website where you can see a schedule of our upcoming webinars. And then we're going to have a few more poll questions throughout the presentation. And I've seen some responses coming in. It looks like more people are saying no, which is great because that means we're reaching a new audience, and hopefully we can figure out a way to help you out in the future with any government contracting questions you have. So the upcoming events link is in the chat right now, and the nice thing is today's presentation is going to last about an hour, and this presentation usually covers 2 hours, if not more, because there's a lot of information. But next week, exactly 1 week from today, we'll be doing the full version of this presentation. So if you feel like we sped through things too quickly today and you'd like a refresher, you can get that a week from today with one of our counselors presenting that information. So we do webinars on all sorts of government contracting topics, and our goal is always, hopefully we provide you something valuable that you can walk away with saying, okay, that's helpful. But there's a good chance you're also going to leave today and think, okay, that's helpful, but how do I actually go through this process? And that's where our one-on-one counseling services come into play. In addition to the webinars we provide, you can also schedule appointments with our counselors. We have 2 full-time and 3 part-time counselors that are available to help. And you can sit down with them virtually, of course, right now, one-on-one, and ask them any sort of questions you have related to contracting. It might be about a proposal you're preparing, or it might be about how to get a certain certification, or how to register in a certain database to sell to the state, or to sell to Caltrans, whoever you're trying to work with. So the one-on-one counseling and the webinars are completely free of charge. You can attend as many as you want and sign up for counseling as often as you want. We do have one last service we provide, which is called bid matching. And we have a very small annual fee for that service, which is $199. And basically, it's a search profile that we create for your business. We put in keywords related to the work you do. We put in industry codes related to the work you do. We tell it where to search geographically. And if you have a product or a service that you can provide anywhere in the country, then it'll search up to 2,000 websites on a daily basis where opportunities are posted, and then send you a nice little summary email every day saying, here's the new opportunities we identified that you might want to take a look at. So again, $199 a year hopefully isn't too expensive, but also we give you a month to look at it for free. And if after 30 days you don't think the results are worth it or anywhere close to what you're looking for, we'll just turn it off and not worry about the fee. So that's a real quick overview of our program, but we have a lot of information today. So I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm going to speed through some of this very quickly. And there's all of the services we provide that I just talked about. I was still looking at the poll results, and it looks like, yeah, a fair number of you have not worked with us before. So that's great. And for those of you that have worked with us, thank you for being clients, and hopefully we can continue working with you in the future as well. Okay, so today we're going to talk about a lot of different things in terms of creating winning proposals, but our purpose basically is to help you identify contract opportunities that are realistic. Some people get really excited about contracting and jump in maybe a little too deep before they realize what the opportunity actually is, so we can help you figure out, is it a realistic one for you? Understanding how the government describes what it needs, that can be like learning a completely new language. So luckily our team has decades and decades of experience in this type of work and can help you figure out, okay, this solicitation has a lot of really big and confusing words. What are they actually saying? Obviously the goal is to prepare an effective proposal, and we can absolutely help out with that. Hopefully today's presentation will get you on the right track, but if you have follow-up questions on, did I answer all of the government's questions adequately? Did I provide them the information they're actually asking for? Our counselors can sit down with you and say, okay, we looked at the solicitation and here's what they were asking for. And then you send us what you prepared in response, and we can identify, are there gaps between what the government is asking for in the solicitation and what you're submitting in your proposal, and hopefully help you make it as effective as possible and ultimately improve your chance at winning government contracts. So we've got 4 sections, and we're going to breeze through them, and we've got a lot of poll questions too. So we're going to talk about preliminaries, how to prepare to write a proposal. We're going to talk about actually putting together the proposal, and talk about what to do afterwards, because once you submit the proposal, that's not always the end of the process, and there's some following up that might need to be done. And we actually don't have exercises today. That's one of the things we had to cut because of time on this one. So we do have some handouts and resources we're going to provide you, though. And again, if you'd like to attend the fuller version of this workshop, we're going to be doing it again next week. Okay, so real quick, just because the government says a lot of different things when they're looking for offers from small businesses, and they don't always mean the same thing. So bids are a little bit different than what we're going to be talking about. That's usually a simpler process where it's going to be basically you submit a price, and that's how the award is made. You say, we can provide X number of this unit for this price. Proposals are more detailed. They are in response to RFPs, which stands for Requests for Proposal, and they're going to be a much more detailed response than just giving them a number, because you're going to have to describe how you're planning on doing the work, who's going to be performing on the contract, what their experience is. You're going to talk about your past experience as a company on similar contracts, and so both bids and proposals are basically a response to the government saying, here's what we can do for what price, but the proposal has a much more detailed response than just simply quoting a number. So let's talk about 2 words that sound very similar and are actually quite different, and they are easy to confuse. You'll hear government agencies a lot of times say they are looking for a responsive and responsible contractor. And responsive and responsible are sort of the same thing, but there are some basic differences that are really important to understand. And that difference is responsiveness means, can you follow instructions? It's as simple as that. It just means, did you read through what we are asking you to submit in your proposal, and did you submit it in the right place? Did you answer all the questions? Did you provide all the attachments? It's basically, can you follow directions from start to finish? And not being able to do that is a really quick way to get yourself disqualified or ruled out of being awarded a contract, because the government basically says, well, if you can't respond to our solicitation with exactly what we're asking for, we don't trust that you're going to be able to actually perform the work the way we want it performed. So responsive just Responsiveness just means, do you understand how to follow the instructions? Responsibility is a lot more about you and your company. It's basically saying, does the government believe that you are able to perform the work? Responding to a solicitation and checking all the boxes they're looking for is great, but they still have to have something in there that tells them, okay, this company is responsible. They've done this work in the past. They have X number of years of experience, whatever it might be. But in order to determine your responsibility, they're making a judgment about your company, essentially. Okay, not going to spend too much on this, but in a bid, when you are talking about responsiveness, it's basically you either do it correctly or we won't consider you. That's as easy a way to put it as there is. In a proposal, responsiveness is important, but it also can have some back and forth. There are certainly occasions where they will review all the proposals they receive and identify a contractor that they think they want to make the award to, but ask them to kind of go back and revise a few things and maybe clarify a few things just to make them absolutely sure that that's the right company to award to. So just remember when you're submitting a bid, which again is just basically a quote on a price, you don't have much flexibility. You either follow the rules or you're not considered. In a proposal, if you need to clarify something after the proposal is submitted, there are opportunities on occasion to do that. Okay, so let's talk about some simple things that qualify you as responsive. This first one hopefully should go without saying, but hopefully you submit everything on time. If it's due at 3 p.m. today and you submit it at 3:01 p.m., that's not going to be considered for award. It's a very hard line on deadlines and submissions. And part of the solicitation will also tell you where to submit it. Most places now you can do it electronically, but you need to pay close attention to where it needs to go and by what time it needs to go there. Hopefully you have all your pricing information in there. That would be unfortunate to write a really good proposal and leave something important about the price out. If you're asked for references, absolutely have to provide them. Oftentimes people, when they see a RFP, they want to, this is called taking exception, but basically they're saying we disagree with something that the government is asking for here and we think we should be able to do it a different way. Please don't treat government agencies like that. In my experience, they don't appreciate having somebody else tell them how they should have the work done. So most of the time when you're responding to a proposal, you're not allowed to say, well, we would like to do it this way instead. Make sure it's signed. Blue ink is an example, but in all honesty, if they say it absolutely has to be signed in blue ink, then follow that instruction because there's a reason they're asking for that. And don't go over the page limitation. The agencies have to review sometimes dozens of these proposals, and they can be really complex. So if they tell you to limit it to a certain number of pages, absolutely follow that rule. If you go one sentence onto a page beyond the limit, it could result in being disqualified. So this is just to hammer home the point of you need to be able to follow the rules because they will disqualify offers for what seems like a nitpicky detail that, and it's just an unfortunate situation if you don't follow the rules and don't even get your proposal considered. Okay, so that's being responsive. Again, that's following instructions. Let's go back to responsibility, and that, again, is your company's ability to perform on the contract. And here are some examples about how the government determines that. I'm not going to go into each of these in detail, but they basically look at, do you have the financial resources? They might ask you for some pretty detailed financial information about the company to ensure that you're able to perform throughout the life of the contract and can have the capital to finance that contract, essentially. Prior performance, that's a big one. We also call it past performance. Pretty much every proposal you submit, they're going to ask you, have you done this work for the government before? Can you give us examples of exactly what type of work you've done in this area for which agencies? If you haven't done it for the government, have you done it for private sector? They're going to look at your management and technical skills. There'll be a section absolutely about who is working on the project, who's overseeing it, what their qualifications are, what their experience is. They might ask you about your facilities and your equipment. And there's any number of things they can use. But basically, again, looking at responsibility, they're going to take a hard look at your proposal and your company itself and say, does this look like a reliable contractor if we award to them? Okay, so that was a real quick summary or a real quick preliminary section. We did talk briefly about bids and proposals. We talked about following instructions, and I apologize because I'm going to keep hammering that point home. Absolutely do what they tell you to do in the solicitation. And we also talked about what it means to be responsible. So with that, I think we're going to go to our next poll question. And this one's pretty straightforward. We just want to know if you have ever worked or responded, to an RFP before.
Here we go, Brett.
Perfect. It's up there. So I'm going to move on, and I'll keep an eye on the results and see what sort of experience we have. Don't be shy if you've never responded to one. That's why you're here right now, to learn how to do it more effectively, or how to do it at all. And if you have responded to one, you're here hopefully to learn how to do it more effectively. So I'm going to jump into my next section. So before you actually respond to the proposal, you can do some homework and some things to help you get prepared. We're going to talk about each of these pretty briefly, but obviously you need to identify what the government is asking for. And this point B on this list is a little bit more of a tricky one because it's kind of a philosophical thing, but figure out how you can be a solution. It might be as simple as they're asking for a very basic construction service, and that's what our specialty is, but sometimes you have to kind of get creative and say, okay, how can we convince them that we can do this work, and how we are going to be a solution? Believe it or not, there is actually opportunities occasionally to help government agencies develop the RFP. It's not common, but we'll talk about how that works. Anticipate what their needs are going to be. Always, always, always participate in any pre-proposal conferences or webinars nowadays. Identify what you're going to need in order to do the work. And if you need to put together a team beyond just who you currently have at the company, like if you have to do some subcontracting and work, or maybe as a joint venture, that's something you can do to prepare for the proposal as well. And looking at the results, good. It looks like more of you have responded to RFPs. So hopefully that'll reinforce some things you're already doing well and give you some ideas on ways to improve. And for those of you that have never done it, then hopefully we'll kind of prepare you on what to expect. And maybe the first time you prepare one, it'll be a little easier than you thought. Okay, so identifying the government's needs, that's not always the easiest thing to do, but you can do some market research. One of the things we can help with at our PTAC is helping you do some research on which agencies purchase your products and services the most often, and therefore which ones are a good target for you to go after. If it's possible, and you can always ask the question, instead of marketing yourself to the contracting officer that's working on the procurement or the contracting staff that's working on it, you really need to know who the end user is, because there's probably a 99% chance that the people awarding the contract aren't the people that are actually going to use that product or service. So if you can find a way to identify who that person is and get some time with them to understand, we always call it their pain points or what keeps them up at night, that can help you really prepare your proposal more effectively, because you know from the person who is going to be utilizing that product or service, this is exactly what they need. Looking for opportunities to meet and develop relationships, that's what events like this are all about, and you're going to have a great opportunity tomorrow to meet some Caltrans staff and start that relationship with them. And throughout the year, we host a lot of networking events, and obviously we're trying to do that effectively online right now. But always attend any sort of event you have where you can get in front of these people and introduce yourself, and just keep showing up and saying, hey, remember me? We talked at the Caltrans Procurement Fair last week or last month, and then just try to establish that relationship. It's always best to try to anticipate what they're going to need before the RFP is out. That's not always possible, but if you do establish that relationship and you can get some information on their forecast for the upcoming year, you can do some preparation before the RFP is actually released. You can always try to find out information on who an incumbent was if it's something they've awarded in the past. And we're going to talk also about how to listen to what they ask for and interpret what they ask for, and how to position yourself as a solutions provider. So, like I said, envisioning how you can become a solution is kind of a philosophical thing. But ask yourself, what problems do they have that need to be solved? And how can I make it clear in my proposal that we are the problem solver for this problem that they're having? What problems might they run into? It's completely acceptable as part of your proposal to put in some circumstances where you have a contingency plan, because if this situation arises, here's how we can handle it. What fears do they have? And again, sometimes we say fears, pain points, what keeps them up at night. But what sort of questions can you answer that will ease their mind and make them a little more comfortable awarding a contract to your business? And always try to... Yes. I thought I just heard someone say my name, but I'm going to go on because I don't hear anybody now. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's talk about RFP development. This is a rare opportunity, but it does happen on occasion where the government will reach out, an agency will reach out before they even put an RFP out there and say they need some assistance in putting it together. Maybe it's a new process or a new service that they've not purchased before and they need some help developing the scope of work. Again, very rare, so we're not going to talk about it too much, but you do actually on occasion have an opportunity to have input into what actually goes into the RFP. And anytime a government agency reaches out and says, we would like you to, or your company to help us put together this RFP, absolutely take advantage of that. It's not a guarantee. They can't say that if you help us put together the RFP, we'll make sure you get the award, but it certainly cannot hurt your chances if you know ahead of time exactly what's going into the RFP. So if that opportunity ever falls into your lap, please take advantage of it. So another thing to think about is, or ask questions, because you're always going to have a question and answer period. Who's going to be on the committee that is going to be making the decision? And what are their hot buttons? So what is most important to them? And what can you put in your response that will specifically address everybody on that committee and their concerns? And again, if you can find a way to figure out who the end user is and have a conversation with that person before you prepare your response, that's incredibly valuable. So always or never be afraid to ask questions like who's going to be doing the evaluation and who the end user is. And you'll have better luck sometimes than others getting those answers, but there is always an opportunity before submitting to ask questions like that. So we'll talk more about types of questions to ask when you have that opportunity. Okay, so also when you're trying to anticipate what's going to be called for, our team can help you do some research for whatever agency you're going after. We can pull some data that says in the past they've usually purchased this amount, or they purchased it for this quantity, this dollar amount, and we talked earlier about making sure that that agency purchases it in a size and a price that you can handle. You don't want to jump in the deep end too soon if you're not quite ready to perform on a project that is of a certain size and scope. Again, they're going to ask for references. They're going to want to very clearly know that you have the financial capacity to do it. They're going to ask for qualifications and resumes. The last 2 points on this list are very simple, but can be quite a headache. Vendor registrations. There are dozens of different databases that you need to be entered in order to be able to even be eligible to submit a proposal to an agency. And at the federal level, it's very complicated. At the state and local level, they make it a little bit easier, but it is important to know all the different places you have to register. And certifications is a whole other topic. We have a 2-hour workshop on certifications, but those are vitally important as well, because if government agencies all have certain goals on what types of companies they want to award contracts to, whether it's disadvantaged businesses, service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses, all sorts of different certifications are available that can help you be eligible to sell to the agencies, but also really narrows your pool of competition, because on certain projects, they're only going to be putting those out there for those types of businesses. Okay, so we have reached our third poll question, and I am really cruising through here, but our next poll question is, have you ever reached out to an agency to help with RFP development before?
Hey, Brett, before I open up the poll, I was wondering if we can pause for a couple of questions.
Absolutely.
Way back for the blue ink. So is this rule something that applies to all agencies? One have never seen this before.
Yeah, that's a great question because that's just used as an example of something that could be in there that could make a difference, but no, it's certainly not required for every agency. That's just kind of, we use that as kind of an extreme example of just make sure you follow every instruction, but it's not required for everybody.
Okay. Also, will the agency pay for time spent on assisting on the RFP?
That's typically, I don't want to say absolutely one way or the other. I don't think typically that's something that they compensate you for, but I could be wrong on that. And there are there are people on our team that know a lot more about that part of the process that could answer that question.
Absolutely. Okay. Is there a list of databases that we can refer to?
Well, so at our program, we have a list of all the different vendor databases that we know of for every agency. And we can, if you want to set up an appointment to talk to one of our counselors to go over all of that, it's not something that I don't think we have publicly available, but we definitely have that resource available for our clients.
Okay, and last question for now. How would you recommend small businesses to stay current on new rules and regulations relating to government contracting?
Okay, so I'm going to give a resource that is outstanding at posting any sort of news related to changes in federal regulations. This one is good for federal stuff. I don't have a local one that I can provide, but there is a blog called, I'm going to make sure I get it right. I'm going to try to go to the website right now. SmallGovCon. And I'm going to post the link in the chat. To all attendees. If you're dorky about government contracting like I am, I would bookmark that page because the people that contribute to that are incredibly well informed. And I've attended several events that they've hosted with workshops on changes in regulations, and they are the first place I go every time I want to know what the most recent changes are on any sort of regulations.
Thanks, Brett. I'm going to open up the poll here real quick as soon as I get through it.
I assume this one's going to be very, very heavily no, but maybe I'll be surprised. Okay, so while you're answering that, I'm going to move on because we do have about 30 minutes left. So this one I can't stress enough, and I wish we had more time to talk about how to really prepare for this and how to participate in these. But if you ever have a chance to attend a pre-proposal conference or a virtual conference now before the proposal is due, absolutely do it. And don't just do it to sit there and try to get information. Do it to be actively engaged. Ask questions. Prepare your questions beforehand. Introduce yourself to everyone there because everyone there is possibly not just a competitor. They might be someone you can work with together on the project. And certainly there's going to be people from the agency that have the decision-making ability on the project. Your goal should be to go there and impress people and be remembered, not only just to go gather information. And I'm surprised to see the poll results that 14 have responded that they have worked on helping develop an RFP. So that's great. Okay, so I say a lot of these recommendations knowing that a lot of small businesses are very, very small and you don't have unlimited people and resources and able to put together these teams. But we're going to talk a lot about how to try to assemble a team and come up with a schedule and an organizational way to make things as easy as possible. So always designate somebody as a lead, and that person might be the lead every time because there's only 3 people that work for the business at that point, and you're going to have that person always kind of take the lead. Put together a schedule. We've got some resources that'll help you do that, and identify anything, documents, and specs you're going to need ahead of time. And then there's a practice called blue team and red team, and we'll talk about that now. Blue team basically ensures that the outline is correct. So if we go back to responsiveness and responsibility, the blue team is basically saying we are in charge, or I am in charge, of making sure we're responding to the proposal exactly as we're supposed to, and that everybody knows what they're going to be working on. The red team is basically the team or the person that's responsible for how are we going to address these questions, how are we going to make it clear that the people evaluating and participating in the selection committee understand why we're a good fit. So if you're a two-person team, it might be that one person handles one and one person handles the other, or you work collaboratively on both. But if you have a staff of a decent amount of people where you can put together different teams, then it can be a good way to keep organized when you're responding to an RFP. Forming a team to perform the work. If there's an incumbent, make sure you can, well, don't make sure, try to figure out if the end user is pleased with how that incumbent's performance was. They're not going to throw anybody under the bus, but you could always try to say, for this round, since the contract is going to go back out for competition, what are some things that could be improved about the performance compared to the work that was done last time? If your company itself can't provide or can't meet all the requirements, try to put together a team. It's always possible to work jointly with other companies to perform on contracts through subcontracting agreements or teaming agreements. And we're developing actually some content right now for a webinar on how to go through the teaming agreement process and how to effectively manage that. And for the red team, the people that are putting together the core of the response on how you're going to do the work, it's always a good idea to try to have somebody on your team who can be objective and can go through that evaluation criteria that's in the proposal and say, here's how I think we would be scored on this. And be honest. If you're saying you're going to get a 10 out of 10 on every single section, that's probably not the right person to be doing that work. Okay, so we are cruising through these sections. That was preparing for a response to an RFP. Always do your market research. And again, our counselors have been helping people with that forever. So if you need some help on figuring out what the government purchases and how often, we can help you with that. Try to find the buyers before the government issues a solicitation. Anytime you have an opportunity to attend a Meet the Buyers event or a matchmaking event, even if there's not an opportunity right now that's perfect for your company, it's always a good idea to get your name and face in front of those people before the opportunity's out there. Try to find out if there was an incumbent on the contract, if the government was satisfied with the performance. They're not going to give you all the details, but they can certainly answer questions about what could be done better the next time. Always participate in pre-proposal conferences. And if you need resources in addition to what you have at your company currently, try to identify those and also try to identify partners. So, Maria, do we have any other questions? And here's our next poll question.
So we did have a lot of questions, but I was referring them to your website for counseling, setting up an appointment.
Perfect.
So here's the poll.
Okay, so this one's pretty straightforward. And since so many of you have responded to RFPs, I'm curious to see the answers on whether you have a team or if it's a one-person show. And while you're answering that, I'm going to keep it rolling, because we are down to 24 minutes left. Okay, so this is probably the most important part, and this is where, when we do our 2-hour version of this workshop, we'll go into a lot more detail. Reading the RFP document seems like a very straightforward thing, but you might be surprised at how many small businesses don't actually read most of the RFP. Reviewing the scope of work, being realistic and objective and determining whether you have potential to perform the work and win the contract. Understanding the terms and conditions is vital. We're going to talk about evaluation criteria. There are some very similar criteria that you'll see in a lot of RFPs, but then there are some also very specific ones you need to be aware of. Assigning responsibilities. So I see that 34 have said they do have a team for responding to RFPs, which is great. And I'm curious to know if they have some resources that we're going to talk about assigning responsibilities and updating the schedule. And then obviously the goal is do everything correctly, complete it, and submit it. So let's just jump right in. Read the RFP. I'm going to say that again. Read the RFP in its entirety. These documents are long and boring and confusing, but they are actually very informative if you just simply read everything that's in there as far as here's what they're asking for, here's what the requirements are. The good thing is, if you are not a seasoned pro at reviewing RFPs, you can send it to our team. We'll set up an appointment with one of our counselors. And I always tell people, give us, at least a week of heads up before you have to submit your proposal, because it's not something that we could do in a matter of hours and then turn around and say, okay, here's what you need to put in your proposal. But our team is very good at reading through this language that, again, sounds like a foreign language sometimes, and kind of interpreting it and saying, okay, here's what they're really saying, and here's what they're really asking for, and here's what this weird regulation that makes no sense actually means. You're never going to understand every single thing in there right away, but understand as much as you can and ask questions when you're given that opportunity with the government agencies, that you always have a question and answer period before the RFP is submitted. And if, let's see, let's talk about actually being aware of the type of solicitation and type of pricing. So there are certain types of contracts that depend very much on price, and there are certain types of contracts that a factor will be more of the technical proposal than the pricing proposal. Price is not always the first priority. Obviously, some complex jobs, the government understands that they're going to probably need to pay a little more to have it done really well. So just understand when you're going through the evaluation criteria whether price is the most important factor or whether it's something else. So here's the pricing types that are most common. And I'm spend maybe 30 seconds on this because this is basic stuff that we don't need to worry about too much. If it's a fixed price contract, that basically just means you're submitting a price, and when the government says we accept it, that is the price they're going to pay you. There's no wiggle room. And then there are cost-based contracts when the government understands that you might have costs that vary or fluctuate throughout the performance of the contract, and they take that into account and they say, okay, we understand that this is the estimate, but there is some room, some flexibility within the life of the contract for certain costs to be reimbursed that might not have been included in the original proposal. In terms of the government's risk, they have the lowest risk when they're doing a firm fixed price, and I'm not going to bother with all of these different acronyms, but fixed price toward this end, cost reimbursement toward the right end, and basically the risk gets higher for you as the cost reimbursement contracts are coming into play, because the government loves firm fixed price. They know that this is the amount we're paying, and this is not a penny more than we're going to spend on this contract. And then as you get into the cost reimbursement types of contracts, that's where it's on the contractor to make sure they manage their expenses as well as they can. Okay, so statement of work. Somewhere in every RFP, there's going to be something called either the statement of work or scope of work, something like that. That's where you should probably start, because that's the easiest way to make a quick decision on, can we do this? And be realistic, be objective. If you read through the statement of work and you feel anything other than very confident, I would question whether you want to put in the effort to go through the RFP in its entirety and prepare a response. Because if you're not absolutely certain you can do the work, then the rest of it is going to be a huge waste of time and resources, quite frankly. But if you think you can do most of it, but there's areas where you're not confident, again, keep in mind that teaming agreements and subcontracting are always an option to make sure that you put together a team that can completely perform the project. The reason we highlight why you should be awarded the contract is because it's vitally important in your response when you're responding to the statement of work, not just say, one of the biggest, I think, pet peeves that government agencies have is when a company responds by just simply copying and pasting something from the statement of work and saying, our company can do this, and then it's just word for word what the government said. That's great that you say you can do it, but you need to illustrate to them and make them understand, here's why. And here's the team we have and the expertise we have, and here's our approach to the statement of work, and here's why we can do it. And again, I said this several times, but try to have somebody on your team that can be completely objective and rate yourself against the evaluation criteria. We'll talk about the evaluation criteria and what that looks like in a moment, but make sure that you can be honest and say, you know, these are some areas where we're really strong, but these are some areas where they might not give us as high of a score. Okay, so Determine your potential. Is it something that you do regularly and do well? That's kind of goes without saying. Do you have everything you need? Do you have the finances to, do you have the capital to finance the contract? Because oftentimes for several months, you're not going to get payment on a government contract. Do you have all the equipment you have? Do you have the right people? If you don't, do you have the ability to bring someone in for the contract that can help out or to get a piece of equipment you need? Why can you beat the competition? Everybody hopefully has confidence that they can beat their competition, but maybe looking at that a little bit differently. Why are you better? Why are you able to beat your competition? And can you put something in your proposal that illustrates, here's what sets us apart and here's why we're the best fit? And so let's talk about our first handout. And we've got 4 handouts that we're going to provide after the session. The first one is on making a go or no-go decision. This screenshot is not incredibly clear and it's got a lot of language on it, but essentially there are 10 questions on here that you can answer, and there's kind of 3 different sections where you can say, okay, I think we're going to get a negative rating in this area. Maybe in some areas they're going to be neutral and say, yeah, they're pretty good. And then which areas do we think we're going to be related or rated highly on? And you can do that for your company, and you can do that for whoever you think might be performing or submitting a bid or a proposal, and kind of see how your company stacks up against who you think your top competition is. Again, the most important thing here, the vital part, is be objective. Don't give it to the CEO who's going to say we're awesome at everything and we're going to get a 10 out of 10 every time. All right, so we've gotten to our next poll question, and I'll stop for any other questions, Maria, but next question is, has your company developed a go, no-go process? And go ahead, Maria. Okay,
sorry. Can you address how contract exceptions affect how the proposal is evaluated? The exceptions hurt your bid.
I'm sorry, are you saying contract exceptions?
Contract exceptions, if it affects how the proposal is evaluated.
I'm sorry, whoever submitted that question, I think I need a little bit more detail on exactly what you're asking, because when you say contract exceptions, I'm not sure exactly what you're looking for there. I apologize.
That's okay. Also, I think there's a follow-up on that. On contract, sometimes the contract types poorly match the RFP, and the nature of the contract type creates problems. How can this be addressed with a procurement team?
For something like that, obviously, during the question and answer period, I would ask about that. It's very unlikely at that point in the process they're going to change anything on that contract. So if you have experienced those issues in the past, I would strongly recommend trying to, if you have a specific agency in mind that you see this happening at quite a bit, one recommendation would be reach out to anybody in their small business office. Every agency has some sort of small business staff that full-time job is creating relationships with the small business community in that agency. And they often are a good starting point for questions like that that might not be able to be corrected exactly on the spot. But you can say, look, we've noticed a lot of times that this issue is coming up in some of the contracts you're putting out there, and we'd like to have a discussion about why that is causing problems. And the small business staff are dedicated to trying to smooth over those types of processes. So I would absolutely try to start with anybody at the agency's small business office.
Okay, this one is there a limit on how many proposals an organization can win? In other words, if an organization wins an opportunity, does that organization go into a database of already won and probably won't win again?
No, there's no limit. And quite honestly, the more you win, you might find it easier to win the next time because you become very trustworthy and reliable and you have that past performance. So there's no list I know of that says winning a contract means you're not going to be eligible for next time. Okay, so let's go ahead and poll. Perfect. And I'm going to move on because we still have quite a bit of ground to cover. Understanding the terms and conditions. Oftentimes we call this boilerplate language. There's going to be a long list of really boring terms and conditions that you don't want to read and are going to bore you to sleep possibly, but you have to understand what's in there. And all I'll say on this slide is the government expects that you understand. When you sign and submit a proposal, you're telling them, we know exactly what you expect us to do and what we can and cannot do. So if you have any questions whatsoever about terms and conditions, make sure you sit down with somebody on our team so we can walk you through that and make sure you truly do understand exactly what you're signing up for. Evaluation criteria. This is one of the most important parts of the proposal. And after you look at the scope of work, you should absolutely go to the evaluation criteria next and understand what that's going to be, because it's going to form the response in a critical way. So there are usually several criteria, and there's common ones like past performance, price, technical approach to the scope of work, things like that. But make sure you go to them, understand them, and if you were the person making the decision and you said these 3 criteria are the most important, try to envision what they would want to see to make them comfortable that you understand, A, what the criteria is, and that you are going to respond in a way that shows that you are the best fit for the job. So think like the buyer. If you are a visual person that needs a reminder, put the selection criteria somewhere nearby that you can see it every day and are constantly remembering, okay, these are the really important things that we have to focus on, because this is literally how the decision is going to be made and how the proposal is going to be scored at the end. Make sure, if you have a team, make sure everyone knows exactly what their role is and no one's duplicating efforts. Make sure deadlines are clear. Update the schedule daily if needed. And also don't forget to allow time for the delivery. A lot of times the submission right now is as simple as sending an email or submitting something into a database. But if something is due at 3 p.m. tomorrow, don't say, well, let's get together at 2:45 to submit something. Make sure that you give yourself hours and hours, if not days, of time ahead of the deadline, just in case something comes up. Because when technology doesn't cooperate, that can be very frustrating, and it's a good way to run into a incredibly tragic situation of spending weeks or however many dozens of hours on a proposal and then having the submission at the very end have a glitch and it not getting in there on time. Okay, so we're going to talk about a resource called the Gantt chart, which is just a visual way of setting up usually a spreadsheet that kind of shows a timeline saying, here's the tasks that we need to complete and here's the length of time on which we'll be working with them. As you can see on this chart, there's going to be a lot of things that are going on at the same time, but it basically takes you from the start of the process to whenever that deadline is and says, here's what we're going to work on at these dates and during these times. And it looks like 21 of you said your company has a go or no-go process. That's good. I never know what to expect in terms of how many companies are already doing this, so I'm glad to see that 21 of you already are. Okay, so this goes without saying, but you want to follow every single instruction and make sure it's complete. This is where our review process with you can help out tremendously, because, again, we can take that solicitation and tell you, okay, here's what the RFP asked for, here's how you responded, and here are the gaps between those 2 things. And it's not a matter of we enjoy criticizing people's proposals and saying why it's not good enough, but it's always done from our team from a perspective of, here's how we can take this solid thing you've already built a foundation of and make it even better. Proposal writing instructions. Sometimes there are instructions included on exactly how to format everything. And if they tell you exactly how to format it and they tell you you need to answer 10 questions, you should answer 10 questions. And if they tell you we need these 5 sections in this order, you should absolutely do it in that order. And again, it's a really easy way to get yourself disqualified or ruled out, because if you can't follow instructions in the RFP, then the confidence they have in your ability to actually perform the work is going to be much lower. So follow the instructions and take that very seriously, because the government certainly does. We have 2 more handouts we're going to provide, and the 10 proposal writing tips is a great little kind of short resource on here's some things to think about when you're putting together your proposals. And then the other one is kind of trying to get into the mind of people that review these proposals and understand how they think and what their process is. So that is our 2 handouts we've got. To summarize this section, and I do apologize because that is a section that could be 2 hours by itself. read the RFP. I can't say that enough. Read it all the way through. Make sure you understand the statement of work. Make sure you have somebody on your team that can say, here's what we're really strong in this time, and here's where we're going to maybe fall a little bit short. Understand the evaluation criteria. Remember, price is not always the most important thing, and especially on large, complex jobs, it's going to be much more about the technical proposal than the pricing proposal. Make sure you have a system set up to schedule the process. If you kind of just wing it, it's going to be incredibly frustrating. But if you have a process set up on saying, here's who's working on this and the date and the timeline for when that part of the project is going to be completed, it'll keep you much more organized and make your life a lot less stressful. Always, always, always follow all the instructions. I probably have said that 36 times by now. And then use those resources we provide for tips on how to actually write the proposal. Okay. So, Maria, I have another poll question, and if we have any other questions from the audience.
Here we go.
Okay, so for this one, I said a tool like a Gantt chart because that might be the first time you've ever actually heard that name before, but do you have some sort of scheduling and timeline resource available to help your team stay organized? And as we go through that, I am getting close to the end. So I've got a couple more minutes on following up. And this is kind of an afterthought, I think, for a lot of companies because you go through the process of identifying the perfect opportunity, reading through a long, complicated solicitation, preparing a proposal, submitting, and then you kind of just say, okay, I'm done with this, and now I just have to sit back and wait for the phone call saying we got the award. But you should do some things about after submitting the proposal that can kind of help out. So I'm not going to read each of these individually, but understand what the selection schedule is. A lot of people don't, after they submit, they don't know when they're supposed to have been notified of any sort of award information, and they spend days wondering, when am I going to find out? So understand that schedule beforehand. Don't be afraid to reach out to the contracting team and ask if there's any follow-up questions that they have. Typically, they'll do a formal process for that, but just check in if you feel like there's any sort of feedback that you might be able to provide. Always prepare for the opportunity to talk to them in person. There might, or via a webinar in this case. There might be a situation where they select someone they think, or a company they think they want to award to, but they need to have kind of a follow-up conversation and try to prepare for what questions they might have and how you can further clarify what's in your proposal. And always ask for a debriefing. That's something you are entitled to when you submit an offer. If you're not selected, you can absolutely request them to give you a meeting to explain. They're not going to say, here's why we went with ABC company because they did all these things amazingly well. They're going to say, here's what we saw in your proposal that wasn't quite what we were looking for, and they'll give you ideas on how to better respond the next time. You can also ask for a debriefing after you win. That's completely acceptable to say, hey, we're really thrilled that we got this, but we're curious, is there anything else we could have done better? Because I think competition is going to be much harder next time, and I'd like to know how to do even better. So debriefings are valuable whether you are selected or not. So figuring out the schedule, it should be in the RFP. You can always call and ask just to make sure you're clear on that. Check in periodically, and I'm sorry, I'm going to go through like 5 slides right now very quickly. Try to think as many moves ahead as you can. And actually, if you feel like you're being annoying by asking a bunch of questions, the opposite could be true. They could look at that as saying, wow, this company really is interested in this, and this proposal they submitted is great, but they're also really curious to know if there's anything they can do better. So always do that. If they have questions, obviously there's going to be a deadline. So when they submit a question, they're going to expect a response by a certain date and time, and it's going to be pretty quick. So always monitor email and respond as quickly as you can to any questions on that. If they request anything additional, there is a chance that they're going to come back and say, everything looks good, but we still need a few more things to help us make the decision. You can absolutely ask if anyone has been eliminated. They're not going to tell you that we cut out these 4 companies and mention them by name, but you can ask, is the pool smaller at this point? and just always be as responsive and try to offer as much help as you can after the fact to show them why you're a good fit. Communication rules are going to be very cut and dry. After the Q&A period is over and when the final solicitation is issued, there's a good chance they won't answer any questions after that. There's a very strict period of time when you can ask questions and have responses from them. And it should be noted that those responses are going to be public. So any questions you ask will be answered publicly. Preparing for an oral interview, we've already talked about this, but make sure you kind of anticipate what you think they might be asking and have a response prepared. If you're selected or not, ask for a debriefing. I covered that. There's usually a very short time frame, though, so if you're going to get that debrief, as soon as you know what the award decision is, you should ask immediately, just to make sure that you fit within that timeline. At the federal level, it's 3 days, so you have a very short period of time. And always remember that it's a learning experience. There's no way you're going to win every single contract. And if you have, then congratulations, you're the first company in history to ever do that. But learn from the experience and don't get discouraged. Okay, so we are going to wrap up real quickly. I promise this is the last time I will say this, but it's so vital. So much of the headaches that clients run into with not being selected could be solved by just making sure they follow the instructions in the submission. And if you work with us, we'll make sure you follow them to the letter. Obviously, attention to detail is important. And to answer a question that I'm surprised hasn't come up yet, or Maria, maybe it has, but there is no common template for a proposal. We don't have a document that we're going to give you that says, if you follow this format every time, you're going to submit a really great proposal every time, because the requirements always change. And most importantly is your ability to respond to what the government asks for and not just try to give them a template that looks like it was canned and generic and doesn't provide the information they're looking for. Okay, you already have all these links in the chat, so I'm not going to worry about that. And last question's an easy one, but after listening to me speed through this in about 55 minutes, is your next proposal going to be a winning proposal?
Before that, Brett, I have 2 questions, actually, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah, so the debriefs, are they all entitled, or not all agencies provide that?
It's my understanding that they all provide that opportunity. I have not had a situation where a client has reached out to us and said, I was denied a debriefing with any agency. So it should be available through every agency.
Right. And our last question here, are contractors required to have a past performance?
Well, that one, I wish there was a great answer for that. The short version is no, not always. But if you're a brand new company and you haven't been doing this work for a couple of years, even in the private sector, it's going to be much harder to convince them that you have past performance. And that criteria, when we're talking about evaluation criteria, past performance is always one of the top ones. So the answer is yes, you can be that one company that's the exception of the rule that has such a great proposal but hasn't done a lot of the work in the past already. It's very, very rare. So my recommendation on past performance is always, if you've done the work for the government before, that's obviously the best way to show past performance. But if you haven't done that work for the government, have you done it for the private sector? And if the company's new, but is made up of a team of people who have a bunch of experience in that industry, you can say, okay, our company doesn't have the past performance, but here's the experience of our team that we've been doing this for 50 years combined with all of our experience on the team. So that's kind of how I would prioritize past performance.
Absolutely. So I'm opening up the last poll. Here you go.
Perfect. And sorry, everybody, I'm not going to give you an option to say it's not going to be a winning proposal because we want you in that positive mindset. So we'll let you guys respond to that. And at this point, that was my contact information on our website. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have after the event if you want to send me an email. But at this point, Michelle, I'm going to turn it back over to you so you can wrap up for us.
Thank you so much, Brett. Thank you for this great workshop today and for participating in PAC Day yesterday. We really appreciate it. And as Brett said, PTAC is providing this workshop again next week. So if you're interested, in the chat box was the link to their website, and you can sign up for this event next week through the PTAC. So I hope you're all looking forward to tomorrow's event, which will provide you with the opportunity to hear directly from the Caltrans purchasers. We have 2 sessions, a morning and afternoon session. We will have different purchasers at each session, so please sign up for both if you're available. The purchasers will discuss items that they've previously purchased, as well as items they're looking to purchase within the next week or 2. So we encourage you to register. Once you close out this session, you'll be prompted with our post-event survey. Please take the time to fill this out, as it will allow us to improve our district's future events. All contact information for our PAC partners will be shared with those in attendance, along with the recording of this session shortly after the conclusion of our 3-day event. If you have any questions in the interim, you may reach out to our small business team at d11.smallbusiness@dot.ca.gov. See you guys tomorrow. Thank you.